Welcome back to episode 5 of Steeped in Portland. Today we will be steeping with Tom Sollitt. Tom is a Portland community organizer, creative strategist, and the founder of Asian American Town, as well as the legendary Makers Market. One of the newest developments in his journey is that he's also a city council candidate for District 3, which happens to be my district, focused on strengthening the city's economy and supporting the cultural assets that make Portland unique. Tom also joined us for the pilot event to sip and support Chris and Karina from episodes 1 and 4. He is also our final guest for our first production cycle of Steeped in Portland. But before we dive in, I want to thank you, Tom, for joining us last September. Even back then, you had a lot of things going on. I'm just curious, what made you decide to come sip and support an event like ours?
So I'm familiar with Chris. I've been to his tea sessions out at the park, which happens to be kind of close to where I live. But I've seen so many people put the effort into getting communities together, and I always think it's really valuable to be present if I can make the time.
Thank you for indulging that little curiosity. Can you give the viewer a little bit of background as far as what prompted you to found Asian American Town as well as the Makers Market?
I thought that there was this opportunity because post-COVID or during COVID, there was this rise in Asian hate. And what we saw was this interesting reaction by younger Asian Americans to lean into their culture more. But that also led to all of this kind of cultural entrepreneurship. And this energy was collecting, growing, but they really didn't have a lot of focal points for where to direct it. And it seemed like a good opportunity that none of the current nonprofits or organizations or groups really were structured to help kind of focus that energy into something that could build momentum or become more of a foundational thing that could last. Asian American Town is more of the platform, then the legendary Makers Market is more of a proof of concept for what happens if we can subvert capitalism to produce the types of cultural enrichment that we want to see. To date, basically everything we have when it relates to culture is either 100% driven by commercialism or a corporation is doing it as an event to kind of promote their products or services, or it is kind of dictated by a grant that some organization had to apply for. So it comes with all these different stipulations, hurdles, and restrictions. So the goal was to figure out if we can harness this kind of new capital that was being created, we could have more of a say in what's happening within our communities and what's being produced by them.
And can you kind of share some of the numbers that are behind that event, like how many vendors you had, the visibility, reach?
Yeah, so the very first event was the concept market in September 2022. We had about 10 different vendors, maybe only 100 guests during that time. But I also had been initiating these conversations with the Portland Night Market, and they were generous enough to partner with us for the very first debut of the legendary Makers Market, which had over 130 vendors and partners and brought in over 13,000 people. Fortunately, they have a system where you can buy tickets to kind of skip the line, but through that, they were able to see a lot of different zip codes coming from out of state. So we had a lot of folks from California come up, and we had a lot of folks from Seattle come down. And then 8 months later, through support from the city of Beaverton, we were able to expand the footprint of that event by 4. So we went from about 40,000 square feet that we took over to about 160,000 square feet. Went from 130 partners and vendors to 200. We were able to do everything from fly filmmakers to talkbacks up from California. I was able to reach out to folks from Seattle who had participated as guests in the very first event to come down and help document and kind of do this really incredible expression of both film production, thought leadership, and we even had a whole artistic performance on the main stage of the Patricia Reeser Performing Arts Center.
Okay, I am very familiar with that area. It's a beautiful venue. I think I got to watch the Philippine Ballet go there. So how long did the legendary Makers Market run for in total so far?
So we've had 3 editions. Last summer was the very last one.
And that is due to your newest development.
That is correct.
What prompted this new chapter?
So I've always been interested in local government and how that kind of impacts communities' abilities to do for themselves. And in 2021, I was volunteering over on 82nd Avenue during the ODOT PBOT changeover, and I felt like there was some openings for communication with the community. to really help them feel like they had a participatory voice in what was happening. And during that time, they were also working on the new Portland City Charter. So I knew that this opportunity to run for city council was starting to open up, and I wanted to see what that looked like.
When you say Portland Charter, could you give me a little bit more?
So we went from 4 commissioners, councilors, and the mayor to a system where we now have 12 councilors, the mayor, and a city administrator. So we went from kind of more of a weak mayor system with councilors kind of running individual bureaus to councilors now working as a body for more localized representation to write legislation to help build that kind of foundation on which the mayor and the city administrator need to execute against.
And when you say execute, is like that using funds or
Yeah, using
allowing?
funds and delivering services.
Okay. Do you think if you were to secure a seat, you would be able to restart the Legendary Makers Market in that role, or you have to pass that torch on?
I think I'm passing that torch on. I think what was great about the last couple of years is I wasn't the only person. It was part of this larger movement of Asian American people coming together across food, music, film, and entertainment to really start building different communities that are now just flourishing. So
When did Portland start feeling like home for you?
I think Portland started feeling like home after I stopped just kind of living within Portland and when I started participating in different communities. So I could kind of start seeing my own kind of imprint on kind of what's possible to kind of also influence the environment that I was in.
And that's mainly a result of organizing events. Yes.
Exactly. So organizing events has been a great tool to kind of meet different people and to feel a little bit more connected with the place that I live in.
So in organizing all of these events, it started feeling like home, but what do you think internally changed?
A friend of mine, when I was living in Korea, and mentioned their version of success was, what can you do to help somebody else go further? And I think that's what these events have allowed me to do, is create this positive impact to help more people get seen, amplify the work they're doing, and also connect some dots that maybe otherwise wouldn't be connected.
Do you think that will continue to happen if you were to secure a seat, or do you think you might get a little too swept up in the role to continue connecting people as you have been?
I think all it's going to do is accelerate the things that I've already been doing and multiply it by like 1,000.
I could not imagine the whole lead up to this and the pressure you must be under, especially with all of the things going on politically on a global and national scale. I think it takes a very specific type of person to embark on pursuing a career in politics. Do you have any fears about this campaign or moving into that next stage in career?
Not too much. I think best case scenario, I get elected. Worst case scenario, I've done all this activity to meet a bunch of people that otherwise wouldn't really have a reason to talk with me.
What do you think most people misunderstand about what you do?
Just like anybody else, people see what's readily presented to them. So for me, that is an event, it's a program, and people think that I am a event producer, but I'm really just applying the tools of creative strategy or brand building and just accelerating that through a project that's very visible for everybody else to see.
Okay, and is that just for your events or other, like I would assume with the Legendary Makers Market, that was a shared visibility, but can you tell me about some of the other events that you've shared that visibility with and how it's affected them?
Well, the first thing I did, because I was living in South Korea before moving to Portland for about 7 years, so the understanding that your network really is your net worth really just struck home. And even though I grew up in Oregon, went to Oregon State University, I graduated in 2008. So like 99% of the people I graduated with didn't make it in their careers or they moved away. And the only person I knew in Oregon really was, or in Portland, was my sister. So kind of leaned on them a bunch and then kind of felt lost for the most part. But having an opportunity to start producing an event really just opened the door where I was able to call somebody, slide into their DMs, email them, and start conversations that kind of help build this kind of network that I didn't know I could create out of nowhere just by having a random premise kind of plucked out of the air.
Goodness. You mind if we pause and have a drink of some tea?
Yeah.
Do you think in that discovery of building your network and leaning on the community that held you through that time frame, there was something that emotionally changed for you?
I'm not sure if you're experiencing this with the project you're doing right now, but as soon as you kind of pick a direction, things just present themselves to you. Like doors open, a conversation happens that you didn't know was going to happen. So I met somebody randomly I went to school with who was doing all the design work for this cannabis events company.
What company?
A cannabis events company.
Thank you.
Because his work was done, he was trying to find some relevancy to kind of stay with this group. And then we started talking, hanging out. I was trying to teach him how to build a sales pitch deck so he could also assist with selling tickets to their event. And through that process, my sister's partner at the time heard what I was doing and was like, oh, you should go meet this guy named Leather Stores, who was the chef owner of Leather Rot, but also this really big name in cannabis infused food making here in Portland. So he'd been on shows like Bong Appetit. He'd done some work with Willamette Week for different dinners. And we went to go talk to him. We presented the pitch deck for his other events group. At the same time, he was like, all right, boys, if you can find me $5,000, I'll come do this dinner for you. So then these parameters, this framework, this goal setting started to just pop up one step at a time. And it kind of helped kind of provide a direction, led us to different people. And it was a path that was always there, that just kind of revealed itself just one step at a time or one conversation at a time. And I found that's been true every single time I've picked a different direction for events and programs.
I would imagine you've helped quite a few individuals. Have you helped every individual, say like through the platform or in other ways as the example you just provided in the same way, or is it just kind of?
It's case by case. I think it's sort of understanding kind of where two things or three things can come together. So my friend Jonas was doing BIPOC nights for First Thursdays at Portland Center Stage. So I came and asked him one day, I was like, so are you doing anything for the Asian American community? It'd be great for us to also do something here as a showcase for artists. And he was like, yeah, we have an opportunity to maybe do this, but we don't know who to connect with, basically. Or he probably knew who to connect with, but it just was maybe not a thought that...
Not a priority.
Yeah, at that time. But I'm also friends with Alana, who was starting this platform called Pop Fever for Asian American pop music artists. And all that needed to happen was to put the two together. And then we had a showcase a couple months later.
How long ago was that event or collaboration?
That was in 2022.
2022. And was that right before you started doing your own community organizing?
That was right after I decided that I was going to start building the Asian American Town platform. So I was already looking. And it's sort of that thing, once you start looking for something, you start noticing things that...
The path reveals itself.
Yeah.
Was that a moment on a path of so many moments that kind of guided you to where you're at right now? Or are you able to single out the single moment that you knew you were going to go and found that platform or the Legendary Makers Market or run for a seat on city council?
I think there was a changeover in 2022 where I realized what I've been doing is dovetailing to support other people in their projects. And I really just needed to take the driver's seat and try to get all the way to a certain point and take the full responsibility for that.
Sometimes the best way to learn something is to observe, assist, and build with someone else.
Yeah, and I think that time had kind of come and went, and I can do the same thing while kind of leading projects as opposed to kind of like leading projects from behind the scenes.
I think you may have touched on it a little bit earlier, but when you were kind of going through that, post-graduation in '08 and trying to kind of figure out your own path, what community held you the most during that time of uncertainty?
In '08, well, I decided when I was 13 that I was going to move to Korea. So I had already
13.
planned to go to Korea after graduating from Oregon State University. So it just coincided with like that recession crash. But it was also a really interesting time to go there because so many people who normally wouldn't go to Korea ended up in Korea that year. It took me all the way until the summer of 2009, but the Korean government at that time wanted to have a native English teacher in every single classroom for high school, middle, and elementary. So I found myself in this random cohort of people who, once again, normally would never have considered going to Korea, but the recession happened. So they were all looking to do something for a gap year from South Africa, Australia, Ireland, the UK, Canada.
Okay. And you are of Korean
Yeah.
descent.
So I was adopted from South Korea, which is why I made the decision pretty early to try to go there.
Gotcha. Was the mix of individuals that participated in that, your cohort, heavily Korean, or were there just a mix of
It was just a
all?
mix of all people. I think that's what was kind of great because I think predating 2008 or 9, the idea of who was trying to go to Asia from the United States was a little different.
There was actually something I caught on your website, and just to kind of quote it. So, during this phase of your campaign, the goal has been to meet with different stakeholders, changemakers, artists, and linchpins for their communities. How do you identify a linchpin?
At this point, I'm finding people who have made themselves very visible as either platforms for people in the community, like Jonathan Mouse from Bike Portland, or the folks over at the Save Lloyd movement. And they host regular meetings. I just attend quietly, then I talk to them and kind of see if there's any sort of value alignment or just campaign alignment, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Have you ever worked in collaboration with someone with that alignment originally out of the starting gate and then a loss of alignment somewhere along the line?
It's maybe less of a values alignment, but a goal misalignment. So I think people see the outcome that's possible and then they associate that with themselves and kind of where that's going to help take them. And maybe that's going to take them somewhere that is in a different direction than myself. So normally it's not so much a values misalignment, but it's more the direction somebody is taking is completely different than the one that I am, but we can intersect for just one project.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like you were kind of aligned on that like end goal result, but then the process just got a little wonky in that example.
I would say sometimes if I feel like the goal isn't to produce the experience for the participants, and the goal is to use the execution of the event to elevate the producer, sometimes for me that really is the biggest contention for that misalignment is are we coming together to create a space for our community that otherwise wouldn't exist, or are we using this community to elevate ourselves?
How do you normally navigate like situations like that when as they arise? Because I'm sure when you're collaborating on a project, it's kind of hard to change gears, especially for some of the big ones that you've done.
I think it really does depend on kind of what phase of the project you're in, but sometimes you really do have to make some hard decisions later on to either cut ties or really have that straightforward conversation that maybe this isn't a great match. And the sooner you can identify that, the better.
Words of advice, it sounds like. Actually, that's a great segue into my next question. What experiences do you think you've had that give you an edge or an advantage as it pertains to governance?
I think it's really the fact that all I've been doing since I moved here is creating shared spaces for different people in communities, whether that's just kind of a one-time deal or it's kind of more extended period of time. But
When you say extended period of time, can you explain that a little bit?
so I was the program manager for a nonprofit for about a year, and that was kind of a de facto kind of community space where different people were intersecting. They all wanted to use it. Sometimes they would have to get together to do larger events and programs, and you kind of have to be a little judicious about kind of like how you communicate with people, exercise fairness, and just making sure that everybody feels comfortable.
That's a tall order to make everyone feel comfortable, but that would be the part that informs your ability to govern.
I would say because all the work I've been doing is very rooted in people's experiences, and they will let you know how that turned out pretty quickly by either not returning for something later or they will let you know in the moment.
So you've
But
gotten a lot of feedback, it sounds like.
I would say because the stakes are resting solely on my own finances most of the time, my own reputation that I built up with different people in the communities or direct relationships, that I've had a lot to lose if I don't deliver. And I have to deliver. I've had to deliver in real time in a time frame that matters to folks. I think that's the big edge I have on anyone who's been in governance or anyone who's worked in different institutions or nonprofits where they may be able to have an idea, a plan, and maybe it doesn't pan out. But the worst thing that happens is maybe they have to go find another job somewhere else. They don't feel the same level of consequence for their inaction or inability to get a job done.
Heavy. But thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I I'm excited to see where things lead you. You kind of mentioned the importance a few times of having diversity of thought, diversity of experience in a couple of our conversations. What is the importance of equity in the work that you have done and the work that you aim to do if you secure a seat?
I think equity, as it's defined, is making sure to not just provide equal access, but it's to enable people to participate. And what I've seen through this entire experience, especially this last 3 months where I focused solely on civic engagement, is the lack of ability for different communities to participate. Either they're too busy, there is no kind of maybe childcare provided for folks.
When you say participate in what?
Okay, so I've seen a lot of different things like town halls, coffee hours with counselors, just different sessions that I always tend to see a lot of the same demographic of folks coming. So they're either to this point where they're so frustrated with what's happening in their community that they are deliberately making time and sacrificing a bunch of their own to show up, or they have kind of more space and availability and flexibility of time to come and participate. So we see a lot more retirees, but we definitely don't see this kind of vast range of people that live here when it comes to even probably more on a racial or ethnic basis. There's many times where, especially in like neighborhood associations or business associations, that I've just kind of come and been a guest at, that I am the only person from a non-majority community that is there. And that makes me concerned about the lack of diversity in approaching problems. We also lose talent. We also lose perspective. It becomes too singular.
How do you plan on getting, say, even just individuals at our age range to participate in governance, politics, policymaking, etc.?
I mean, I think that is the ultimate kind of vision or dream, is to have a community broadly that feels comfortable participating in civic engagement and then seeing a result from that participation. So part of that is making sure that the structures for the lowest barrier entry points, like neighborhood associations, are well supported. But right now, our Office of Civic Life has been severely underfunded in this last kind of iteration of the government change. So it went from like several people in each area of town to just shoestring kind of staffing for kind of centralized structural support offices for different districts that serve dozens of different neighborhood associations. So I want to see more budget driven to civic life that can in turn provide more support for neighborhood associations to reach out and expand their presence within neighborhoods.
What is the plan there?
So I think what we've done is a great job of becoming more local in representation by having districts. So we went from 4 commissioners over bureaus. And typically the reason people thought that might be problematic is that we tended to get people that represented just a specific group of interests, as opposed to kind of localized representation for what's happening here in District 3 or District 2 or District 1 or District 4, and making sure that there's ready access to a representative for people that live there. But I think that we can go even further down to the neighborhood level, so people have more capacity to reach out to their neighbors to get them involved if something is happening, or distribute information that might be needed.
So a further decentralization of power is what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. And resource.
And resources.
Because it's not just decentralizing responsibility, you have to back that up with providing capacity and resource to do so.
That sounds sweet. It also kind of makes me nervous as a realtor at homeowners associations. Would there be a lot of stipulations as far as neighborhood associations qualifying to receive those funds so that they had more agency?
Well, I think this is a good opportunity for us to revisit kind of what qualifies neighborhood associations to be part of this kind of structure that gets supported by the local government. So most of them right now are trying to figure out how to attract more people to participate. So some are really more open to having renters. But I did sit on a couple of conversations where some homeowners were like, well, we don't want renters because they're only going to be here a short time. Maybe they won't think about this neighborhood the same way that, people who have bought a house will. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to adjust what those expectations are for neighborhood associations in general through incentives that includes more kind of structural support, more funding, more budget, and more say kind of the infrastructure that is happening around them.
I like that. I think that's a really great thought to tickle out. I don't know if you grew up with this same pillars of character I think it was like trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness. And the last one was citizenship. So terrific. Yeah.
What?
Anyways,
It was like,
it was always weird in grade school, high
Yeah.
school, just the thought of citizenship at that time. But it sounds like part of your platform is to get that civic engagement up.
yes, we absolutely need the civic engagement up. I think that's the only way we're going to see more people take responsibility for what happens here. And it makes them meaningfully attached to Portland as people who don't just live here, but people who are part of this community.
I'm hearing some stewardship, like taking ownership.
I mean, to kind of go full circle, it's like when Portland stopped just being a place that I lived in, but a place that I really saw that I could influence changes within or make my own mark on this place. It changed my perception of what it meant to be here or to be a Portlander. I think that's where just stop being a place where I might just stay for a little bit to being a place that I could see myself living.
Living and building
Mm-hmm.
and growing. That really resonates. I don't know why. Can you actually share? Because I brought the tea,
Mm-hmm.
but you brought something else.
Yeah, I brought some sake. It's produced here in Oregon over in Forest Grove. So it is unique as one of the only sake breweries we have. So they have a long-standing relationship with this restaurant as well. And it's one of the first places I went to after moving here to Oregon. My sister took her staff on a team bonding experience to do a tour of their facility in, I think this was 2017. And then they came back as vendors for the Legendary Makers Market, the first one in 2023. And then I was able to have them come back the next year in 2024 as sponsors, and then in 2025 as actual partners within the event to run their own space.
Oh, wow.
It's a relationship that's changed over time.
Good ones usually do. I hope it continues to change in all the positive ways. That is really good. That is delicious.
I feel like it's dangerously drinkable. So
How else am I supposed to get the truth out of you anyways?
it's true. There's a reason why most business sessions for Asians or Koreans and Japanese, I think, involve a lot of drinking.
Gotta lower your barriers,
Yeah.
release inhibitions. Speaking of which, politics has kind of a connotation when you look at national, global news and like how one interacts with those in power.
Mm-hmm.
As a candidate for holding some of that, how important do you think diplomacy is in making all of these changes in power?
In power?
Right, because I'm sure it's not going to rub everyone the right way.
I think it's important because if you can't effectively communicate the benefits broadly, then maybe it's an idea that's not fully baked. You still need to work it out. But you should be willing to invite all stakeholders who may be impacted by those decisions to provide their own 2 cents on how that might turn out. And I'm looking at different projects right now within District 3 that I think are, and just in general in Portland, that I feel like there are some people who wield more power that use that to have an imbalance on how they impact different communities. And that's all I want to do is kind of balance things out a little bit when it comes to diplomacy. But I think there's a very kind of fair way to do that.
And yes, go on.
Sorry, I guess I should probably give an example. So there's this group called the People's Depot. They run this really great service for people who are houseless so they can return cans, earn money. And a lot of people that are employed through them now are people who are houseless or formerly houseless, but they need that job because if you don't have a job, you can't get any sort of subsidies or support for rent assistance. So it's one of these really rare opportunities for people to have the structure to kind of pull themselves up out of a really hard situation. Unfortunately, I feel like some of these other organizations that are participating in this, like the Oregon Bottle, I believe, Redemption or Recycling.
The drop bottle?
Yeah, the bottle drop.
Bottle,
so
thank
you're
you.
going to hear a lot about that in the news recently or soon. Recently, you probably heard about it because they're closing some locations. They're closing their Delta Park location, but a lot of people are concerned that it's going to now drive a lot of traffic over to 122nd and then to the People's Depot under the Morrison Bridge, which will imminently move over to Powell in Milwaukee. that caught my attention because I've got two different neighborhood associations who have people that are really concerned about what's going to happen once that the People's Depot moves from under the Morrison Bridge over to Powell. We have a lot of different business owners that are very concerned about what that means for their businesses and the resulting kind of fallout from that. The city has, I believe, done some steps to try to mitigate that, but at the same time, people don't feel like they've been properly heard or respected in the entire situation.
Okay, so
That's unfolding. And that's what I mean about diplomacy is instead of people feeling like something's happening to them, we need to work with these different neighborhoods and stakeholders to make sure they feel like they're part of this result and working together in partnership. So instead of something happening to you, it's something that you're working actively
participating
in.
So let's fast forward. Say you're in your seat, you're on city council, you were one of the very vocal supporters of some policy change, and it rubs folks the wrong way. How do you mitigate the fallout that could potentially occur from one of your policies being passed?
Personally, I hope that I'm only pushing forward policies that are making things more equitable, because I think most of the people that you see standing in the way of certain things are already receiving kind of outstanding benefits for the way things currently are. And to be honest, that is fallout that I'm more than happy to receive.
For doing something equitable for the community rather than, okay. I would hope so. But, I don't think the vast number of individuals and creatives that live here in Portland that you can please everyone. So I feel like it's almost an inevitability that you're going to catch some backlash.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
To speak.
And I expect it. We have a system right now that really rewards people who have understood how to work through the system and understand which relationships to have. And it doesn't provide as ready of access to the broad range of talent we have here for creatives. And I feel like once that door kind of opens up, you'll see some resistance from people who have traditionally had kind of unfettered access to opportunities. But the sheer number of people that will now have the ability to do more because they have access to more resources will far outweigh the number of people who are disappointed by some of these changes that might happen, that I hope happen.
We can all hope.
That will happen. Yeah.
Manifest that equitable change. And what are a few of the first actions that you plan to take if you secure a spot on city council?
Well, number one, I'm going to throw a party. So I am an event producer. So I think the number one thing I need to do is try to get all the people that I think are major stakeholders in District 3 together and use my office as a District 3 counselor to kind of sponsor events that I think will help connect people that need to know each other.
Okay. And does that include just individuals that agree with you, or does that include potential individuals that disagree with you?
I'd say everyone's welcome, and then it's on their own reconnaissance whether or not they want to come, or discernment.
Discernment.
I mean, right now I'm working with some folks over at the Lloyd Center to invite all the candidates for District 3 and District 4 that are up for election this year to come join a group forum, and whether or not they feel comfortable being there is up to them.
Makes sense. But I'm appreciative that you are staying open and not making it a favoritism thing.
I mean, in my personal life, yes. But I think this position, you have to get beyond that.
Yes.
Because whether you like someone or not, you still have to represent them.
Absolutely. Outside of partying, though, what other actions might you take after you secure the seat?
So there are a bunch of different kind of permitting things that I think do need to be adjusted for small businesses to succeed. And I know they're already starting to look at some of these things. There are things that are barriers to new businesses to open. So I'm the advisor for this clinic called HeyDoc. And then I also learned about kind of some of the stuff that's hanging up the Doug Fur Lounge. But because they're new tenants or newly acquiring a space, it's triggering all these different things that they have to do to the building space around it. So
to renovate it?
Renovate it to make it more ADA accessible. So these are some things that's very interesting to me is that I'm not saying that you shouldn't have ADA accessibility, but you're preventing a business from earning revenue because they have to pay this really steep fee upfront to make all these kind of structural changes to a space. And I'm hoping that I can work with the permitting department to maybe adjust the timeline. So let them open with a stipulation that they will get this thing built within a year of operation.
That one's challenging, especially when those historic buildings have have held businesses for so long. And
But it is interesting, kind of like the reasons things get triggered instead of a new owner, a sale, a reassessment. I think you may be
different
familiar.
zoning,
Yeah,
different
familiar.
zoning laws. It sounds very challenging to navigate.
So those are just some of the things that I'll look at. And same with like some spaces, like there's a space called the Native Arts and Cultural Foundation. And similar to the Portland Night Market, they're limited in the number of events and programs they can host there for a certain number of people. So up to 50, they can host events and small gatherings. But over 50, it triggers something else for the zoning for their building or the type of building that they occupy. So they can only host 12 large events in their spaces, which are beautiful and can accommodate some really cool things. But because they're nonprofits or they have a nonprofit that they created, they can host up to 24 events. But to me, that seems like a very arbitrary number that changed just because a business is a for-profit business to a nonprofit business. So you can go from 12 to 24. And I personally would like to see some changes in that for more flexibility.
How long do you think that whole just tackling the permitting that you want to could take?
It can take up to a year, which is why I want to have all these things lined up to execute against immediately, because I know the process doesn't happen overnight. One of the projects that I got, or incidences that got brought to my attention because I have the Asian American Town platform, is a restaurant, a Vietnamese restaurant got shut down because some people made some complaints about the smell of the restaurant. So they had been visited by an inspector for a while, had a bunch of fees slapped on them, and eventually they had to close. And it took the entire, I think, Restaurant and Beverage Association stepping up and talking about how this is problematic to get the commissioner who was in charge of that bureau in 2024 to start taking action around it. But it took them an entire year
And
to get that permit or ordinance changed.
okay, and how's that
It's been
restaurant doing?
Well, they lost that restaurant and they will never go back to it. In that space, I drive by it every once in a while and it's still empty. So a neighborhood lost this thriving business, this restaurant. This person lost income, revenue. People lost their jobs that were employees. And now the space sits empty. And it's been empty for almost 2 years.
Like, are those owners still here? Do you still chat with them? Are you still trying to help them?
I mean, they have other locations, fortunately, so they've got other things to occupy their time. But I thought the ability for the politicians they reached out to at that time, or for anyone in positions of leadership that were in the Asian American community or Asian community, felt pretty inadequate in the response, urgency, and just ability to get something done in their favor.
And will you have the urgency it takes to get things done?
I guess to go back earlier, most of the responsibility I feel is to be accountable to getting things done in a time frame that matters to people.
What is your current accountability system to get it done?
I think a lot of it also has to do with transparency. So there was also no education around how long that permitting process would take. I think those are some things that can kind of help with that accountability, is just keeping up a good line of communication.
Do you have any plans for building political literacy? If your goal is to also increase the number of civically engaged individuals, I would imagine most people don't know how to navigate what you have now learned through your many years of experience.
And this is part of distributing not just resources, equity, responsibility. You're also getting advocates that are distributed throughout your community that can help educate people. So it's sort of, if I can teach one person about a process, they go teach 2 other people, those 2 people teach 2 other people. You can kind of maximize your impact and capacity, even though you're one person. But if you are always trying to be the conduit for which people learn something, then you will always be limited by your own personal reach. So that is the only way to multiply your ability to impact your community.
I'll be interested to see how that plays out as far as the dissemination of information, so that as engagement increases, so does that literacy of how all of these systems are in work. I'm learning a lot, even just sitting here with you.
Well, I think that's the thing about kind of tracking. So I'm basically spending this whole year doing my own informal internship on what city council does. So that's what I'm doing, following them around for all their town halls, coffee with constituents. When they go meet with a group, then I may go meet with that group afterwards and ask them how that went. And they will tell me also the responses they receive from those counselors. And it teaches me all the different ways that their hands are tied, and then openings for education around kind of what is it that a city councilor can and cannot do and can and cannot say, and making sure that that is readily known from the get-go, instead of somebody constantly trying to email my office to get me to do something that I actually can't do. Or if they need to go somewhere else, being able to quickly redirect them to the right person.
Okay.
Oh,
My
yeah.
turn to pour.
Thank you.
And with this pour, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask you about luxury. What did luxury mean to you maybe like 5 years ago? And what does it mean to you at this stage in life?
I would say 5 years ago, I think like a lot of people, just having access to people, places, things, experiences that may be out of bounds for just the everyday person, I considered luxury. It's like being able to come to a place after hours or get to know an owner in a personal way, or to be invited to a special private event. That kind of felt like luxury to me at that time. And right now, I think luxury is having the time and space to actually grow and build relationships with people over time. And that's kind of how that perspective has changed. It's like it's more valuable to know people on a deep level and to know the spaces and places that you're in at a deep level, as opposed to just a very superficial level where it's like, oh, I went to this thing today, and then I went to this thing, I met this person, instead of just saying that I've been able to have enough time to get to know someone or get to know a place.
Cheers to that.
Come by.
Come back.
Am I able to ask you the same question?
Hit me.
Okay, so how has your definition of luxury changed over the last 5 years?
Luxury 5 years ago was always really loud. It meant boats and champagne and really expensive tequila, and something very opposite of what you just shared. When I came to Portland in 2022, luxury to me has shifted immensely. Cliche as it may sound, time is one of the greatest luxuries, and you don't get it back, but it's become this thing where luxury is something that happens when you double down on your why. Why are you doing it? How are you showing up? And how can you uplift the individual next to you? But to wrap things up, now that you've turned everything on its head,
Nice.
you're supposed to be in the hot seat, not me.
Prefer it this way.
I'm going to have to put you on a cooler. You said you grew up in Corvallis.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that brought you to Portland rather than following suit with a lot of your graduating class in '08?
Well, I mean, I did live abroad for 7 years in Korea. So 2016 for me was a pretty wild year. So I had maybe 5 different jobs, and the lack of stability really made me reconsider what I was doing, because I had met kind of my stretch goals, which was learning how to speak Korean well enough after returning to pursue a career in marketing and branding. And that goal had been accomplished for a couple of years at that point. And I kind of took it as a sign that that year being so rocky, that I needed to come back to a space where I could kind of collect myself and create a new plan for a new direction to take. And this is also kind of where my family is. So,
But Portland rather than Corvallis. When did you fall in love with the city?
I think really it was that first project where I was just running all around town, calling people up, meeting them. It took me to all over Portland. So it introduced me to all these new places, new things. I got to meet people doing really cool stuff. Since cannabis was this really rich industry in 2017, and I wish it had continued, but we're seeing people doing cannabis art. I met Ariel from like Stoneware, and she was making these cool, unique pipes that look like geometric shapes. I was meeting people doing kind of equity work through cannabis to provide more opportunities for marginalized communities, people of color. And it was just no end to the amount of people that I could get in touch with. And that's why I was like, okay, this is the place for me.
Accessibility to connection is what I heard. Is that kind of...
Absolutely.
My final question for you. We've been kind of connecting questions from guests that have been anchors to this project. And going back to Electric GG Mixer with Chris and Karina, what is a question that you would ask someone that was in the room with you during that pilot event?
I think a lot of those people have the ability to help others and support them. So the question I have is, when was the last time they needed support, they needed help to get something done or realize a vision? And what was that experience like for them? I mean, I could ask that same question to you, because you have now realized your almost complete set for this initial series
First cycle.
for Steeped.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, you needed a lot of help. You needed to find people. You needed to build these relationships, help get this done. I guess that's the question. And like you said too, sometimes in the collaborative effort, you realize it's not working out for whatever reason. Maybe values don't align, or maybe just direction isn't quite there.
For sure.
So,
well, we will find out. But to what you said earlier, you keep asking the right questions and gunning for something, and that path starts revealing itself. Well, thank you so much for all of your thoughtful answers and agreeing to be in the hot seat from one of your curious constituents. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate this sake. And I'll have to make my way out to Forest Grove now that you've shared it.
I highly encourage it. It is a great experience to check out.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And your favorite.
Civic engagement.
Nailed it. Whoa! This has been Steeped in Portland, Season 1, where stories steep into the fabric of place. The flavors are always evolving, but the community remains. Like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more ways to support or participate. Cheers.